She was blocked at the cabin door, her boarding pass snatched from her hand. And in front of a full first-class cabin, the flight attendant snapped, "You don't belong up here. Move to the back." No verification, no explanation. Just one black woman, surrounded by silent stares, being publicly humiliated for daring to sit where they didn't think she should. And that was just the beginning. The water never came. Her name vanished from the manifest. Her seatmate asked to switch rows. Every insult was dressed as procedure. Every act of erasure delivered with a smile. No one knew who she really was. They didn't care. They thought they could strip her dignity at 35,000 feet and get away with it. But when this plane landed, every single person who looked down on her would look up in disbelief. Before we reveal the moment everything changed, tell us, where are you watching from? And what would you have done if this happened to you? Comment below, subscribe for more true power reversals. And like this video if you believe respect is not optional, it's a right. This is the flight they'll never forget. Celine Vaughn moved through the terminal like she owned it, though she never needed to say as much. Her presence was quiet, calculated, powerful in its restraint. No designer logos screamed for attention. No entourage followed in her wake. Just a tailored graphite gray blazer over a navy jumpsuit, polished leather heels, and a black briefcase embossed only with her initials, SV. Boarding pass 2A. First class. Meridian Airlines. Her gate agent had scanned her in without hesitation, offering a polite nod and the kind of subtle smile reserved for top-tier flyers. Celine returned the gesture with a faint one of her own. She didn't smile often, it wasn't needed. Not when numbers, contracts, and 6-0 wire transfers did the talking for her. She stepped onto the jet bridge, her heels echoing softly off the metal walls as she approached the aircraft. The moment she stepped into the plane's front cabin, it happened. "Ma'am," came a voice, sharper than necessary, polite only on the surface. Celine's eyes met the woman's. Blonde, pristine uniform, arms crossed like a nightclub bouncer dressed by Brooks Brothers. The nameplate read Clarissa Dent. "Economy is toward the back," Clarissa said, her tone clipped, not even glancing at Celine's boarding pass. It wasn't a question. It was a dismissal. Celine's jaw tightened slightly. She didn't blink. Instead, she reached into the inner pocket of her blazer and held up her boarding pass without a word. Clarissa didn't take it. Her eyes barely flicked the card and back up. "I'm going to have to see some ID," she added, as if that paper might have floated into Celine's hand by accident. "That's not necessary," Celine replied, her voice calm and even. "You'll see I'm in 2A. Clarissa's lips twitched, the kind of smirk people wore when they thought they just caught someone trying to sneak into a club they didn't belong to. Finally, she reached for the pass, holding it like it might be counterfeit. Her eyes scanned it. Platinum status. Verified. TSA known traveler. Confirmed. But she didn't budge. "That's interesting," she muttered. "I've just never seen one of these in this format. Did you print it yourself?" "It was sent to me by corporate relations," Celine said flatly. Clarissa's gaze lingered, suspicious. "Sure. Of course it was." Celine said nothing. She had no intention of defending herself for occupying a space she'd more than earned. The awkward silence between them stretched until a middle-aged white man behind her in line cleared his throat, clearly annoyed. Clarissa forced a smile, the sort that didn't move her eyes, and stepped to the side. "Right this way," she said, but her tone betrayed her reluctance. Celine walked past her, feeling the weight of the woman's judgment like static clinging to silk. The cabin was immaculate, soft lighting, leather seats, champagne bubbling in crystal flutes, and it was already halfway full. She found 2A, the window seat, and sat down without ceremony. As she opened her briefcase and slid out her tablet, she could still feel eyes watching her. Not passengers. Clarissa. Celine didn't look up. She didn't have to. She knew this game. She'd played it her entire life. The rules hadn't changed, just the uniforms. Same assumptions. Same condescension. Same attempts to correct what others thought she must have gotten wrong. She wasn't angry, not yet. But she was calculating. Every interaction, Every dismissive glance, every time someone like Clarissa decided that Celine Vaughn didn't fit the picture they had of first class. She remembered it, logged it, stored it for the moment it would matter. And eventually, it always mattered. Clarissa, still stationed at the front of the first-class cabin, was now speaking with a second flight attendant, tall, male, with a hesitant energy, and name tag reading Jonah. Her tone was hushed at first, but the body language was all too clear. Furtive glances toward Celine's row, repeated gestures toward the manifest on her tablet, a quick whisper followed by a tight-lipped frown. Then, louder and more purposeful, Clarissa turned toward the center of the cabin and spoke with forced brightness, but the edge in her voice cut through the air like a razor. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, stepping 2 rows closer and projecting loudly enough for everyone in first class to hear, "we appear to have a seating discrepancy. It seems we have a guest who may be occupying a seat that isn't properly registered to them." Though she didn't say Celine's name, her eyes locked directly onto A. The subtext wasn't just visible, it was screaming. Celine kept her gaze down, her jaw tight, her fingers motionless over the tablet screen. Whispers began to float across the cabin, subtle at first, but growing in volume like the rustle of dry leaves before a storm. A man in 1B turned to his wife with a smirk and muttered something about freeloaders trying their luck. A woman across the aisle stared openly, a flute of champagne halfway to her lips. Celine adjusted her posture without looking up, crossing one leg over the other with quiet precision. If they wanted a performance, she would give them poise. Clarissa didn't stop. She moved to the wall panel beside the galley, tapped the intercom button, and spoke into the cabin PA. "Attention first-class passengers," she announced, her voice faux cheerful but sharp beneath the surface. "We've detected a minor seating error in the system. If you are in a seat that may not correspond with your assigned boarding pass, please return to your original cabin while we verify the manifest." Her gaze, again, cut straight to Celine. There was a pause. No one moved. No one needed to. Everyone knew who the message was for. Celine exhaled through her nose, slowly, measured. She could feel the stares burning into the side of her face. She picked up her glass of water and took a sip, deliberate and unshaken. That was her answer. Jonah, clearly uncomfortable, approached Clarissa and whispered something urgently. Clarissa brushed him off with a tight shake of her head and an eye roll, then leaned toward a man in 3C, a white-haired executive with a watch that cost more than most people's yearly salary, and said just loud enough, "Some people just assume they can sit wherever they want." He chuckled. "No surprise," he said. "Entitlement is contagious." Celine's fingers clenched briefly around the stem of her glass, then relaxed. Her father had taught her never to flinch when disrespected, only to respond when it mattered. But inside, she felt the heat begin to rise. This wasn't just casual ignorance. This was deliberate humiliation, crafted and deployed like a PR campaign. Clarissa, emboldened by the inaction of her colleagues and the complicity of the passengers, stepped closer to Celine's row. "Ma'am," she said, tilting her head slightly, "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass again, just for confirmation." The word confirmation dripped with accusation. Celine didn't speak. She handed the boarding pass over with calm fingers. Clarissa took it, stared for several seconds longer than necessary, then sighed and handed it back. "Still says 2A, she said, like the ticket had betrayed her. "But the system must be glitching. It's just unusual." Celine looked up finally, her expression unreadable, but her voice cool as steel. "Unusual how?" she asked. Clarissa blinked, hesitating. "We typically verify status," she said. "Platinum partners, alliance members, elite qualifiers. We just don't see manual boardings up here often." "You mean people like me?" Celine said softly, not a question. Clarissa opened her mouth, then closed it. As flight attendants prepared for in-air service, Celine noticed the tray carts rolling through the narrow aisle. Clarissa led the procession, accompanied by Jonah, who now kept his eyes low, dutifully checking requests. Clarissa's voice, in contrast, rang loud and cheery, almost forced in its effort to project perfection. "Champagne or sparkling water?" she asked sweetly to the man in 1B. Would you prefer Perrier or San Pellegrino, ma'am? She beamed at the elderly couple in 2C and 2D, placing a warm towel delicately into the woman's hand like she were crowning royalty. Celine waited, observing carefully. The tray approached her row. Clarissa's smile vanished. She said nothing, offered nothing, made no eye contact. The cart rolled by. Celine's row was skipped. Jonah hesitated, half turning back, clearly confused. But Clarissa nudged the tray forward. Celine let it go for a moment, calculating her next move, before gently raising her hand. "Excuse me," she said, calm as ever. Clarissa stopped. "Yes." "I'd like a glass of water," Celine said plainly. Clarissa feigned surprise. "Oh," she replied. "I didn't realize." "Well, we serve drinks according to verified cabin tier, not just what's printed on a ticket." Celine's face didn't twitch. "I am in first class." "Of course," Clarissa said, tone flat, then turned to Jonah. "Jonah, could you please grab a bottle from the back for C2A?" The delay was deliberate. The pause before Celine's seat number was deliberate. Everything was deliberate. Jonah nodded awkwardly and moved off. Clarissa, meanwhile, adjusted the tray with exaggerated care, leaning over Celine's row while serving the next passenger. Her elbow nudged Celine's tablet ever so slightly, displacing it on the armrest. "Oops," she said. "Tight space up here, I suppose." She didn't bother apologizing. Jonah returned with a plastic bottle of warm water, noticeably different from the chilled, glass-served mineral bottles offered to the others, and handed it to Clarissa. Clarissa passed it to Celine without a cup. "Here you are," she said flatly. "Economy packaging for an economy attitude, right?" she added under her breath. Celine didn't flinch. She uncapped the bottle, took a measured sip, and returned to her screen. But the next blow came swiftly. As Clarissa turned again to reach for a napkin on the cart, her elbow swept sideways, and in one accidental motion, her coffee cup tipped off its tray and spilled directly onto Celine's briefcase, which rested in the seat beside her. The smell of bitter roast filled the cabin air as hot liquid splashed across expensive leather. "Oh my," Clarissa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in mock horror. "I am so sorry. These carts are just impossible sometimes." Celine's hand darted out instantly, grabbing a napkin to protect the contents. Her expression remained composed, but her eyes locked onto Clarissa's with chilling clarity. "You might want to be more careful," she said quietly. Clarissa bent slightly, her tone suddenly syrupy. "That bag. I hope it wasn't a real designer piece. It'd be a shame if it got ruined. You know how hard it is to return fake leather for a refund." Celine's lips parted ever so slightly, but no words came. She didn't need them. The look she gave said everything. Clarissa stood tall again, brushing non-existent lint from her sleeve. "Anyway, I'll have someone clean it up. Eventually," she added, then turned sharply on her heel. Jonah remained behind a second longer, visibly distressed. "Ma'am, I'll bring some wipes right away," he offered, rushing toward the galley. The coffee incident hadn't ended with a stain. It had begun something worse. Though Celine never spoke another word about it, Clarissa's eyes lit with the kind of triumph reserved for bullies who believe they've won. But Clarissa wasn't done. Petty cruelty was an addiction, and now she was high on the applause of silent complicity. Less than 10 minutes after the spill, Jonah returned to Celine's row with a set of warm towels and an apologetic glance. But as he reached up to retrieve the complimentary noise-canceling headphones tucked into the overhead compartment, an amenity reserved for first class, he paused. The pouch labeled 2A was missing. Jonah frowned, scanning the other pockets. He checked again. Nothing. "Strange," he murmured to himself. Clarissa, watching from 3 rows back, strolled over with deliberate calm. "What's going on?" she asked sweetly, too sweetly. Jonah turned to her. "The headphones for C2A aren't in the bin." "That's never happened before." Clarissa tilted her head. "Oh, I had them removed earlier." "That seat is." "Well, it was flagged during check-in as unconfirmed. Probably an upgrade mistake. I figured we'd let the verified guests have priority." Jonah blinked. "Her ticket checked out when we boarded." Yes, Clarissa said with a quick shrug, but sometimes the system doesn't show the full audit trail. Just trust me. We've had these errors before. Jonah hesitated, glancing back at Celine, who now sat quietly with one AirPod in her ear and her eyes trained on her tablet. The other passengers were beginning to settle into their movies and drinks. But Clarissa's energy hadn't shifted from predator mode. "I'll just offer her the economy headset," she added with a faux helpful smile, reaching into the side drawer of the cart and pulling out a cheap, plastic-wrapped hair. She handed them to Jonah. "These will do for now." Jonah, clearly uncomfortable, carried the economy headset to Celine and offered them without a word. Celine looked at the flimsy headphones in his hands, then raised her eyes to his with a calm that froze him in place. "These aren't what I paid for," she said, her voice low but distinct. Jonah swallowed. "I know. I'll check again." He backed away without waiting for a reply. Clarissa, meanwhile, had returned to the galley where the flight manifest tablet rested inside a locked drawer. She entered her supervisor code, accessed the live seating chart, and began manipulating the data. With a few taps and swipes, she duplicated the current flight manifest, opened the editable draft, and removed one name. Vaughn Celine, C2A. She stared at the screen, then smirked. She printed the altered version and slipped it onto a clipboard beside the coffee machine. A few minutes later, she made her way toward the cockpit and lightly knocked on the door. It opened halfway, revealing Captain Ray Simmons, stoic, silver-haired, and visibly irritated at being disturbed. "What is it?" he asked. Clarissa stepped in halfway and lowered her voice. "We may have a situation in first class. There's a guest in 2A who isn't showing up on the active manifest. I double-checked it. It could be a security issue." She was resistant when I questioned her boarding. Ray narrowed his eyes. "You're telling me someone boarded first class without a valid record?" "Not exactly," Clarissa said carefully. "It could just be a data sync delay, but her behavior is inconsistent. Refused to move seats earlier. Escalated a drink service complaint. She's demanding premium service without confirming her tier." Ray sighed, irritated. "Show me the manifest." Clarissa held up the clipboard with the altered list. Ray took one look and nodded. "Fine. I'll come take a look when we level off. But if this is a paperwork thing, I don't want drama." "Understood," Clarissa replied, stepping back with a look of smug satisfaction. As she returned to the front, she passed Jonah, who stood frozen outside the galley. He had heard everything. He watched as Clarissa filed the fake manifest back into the drawer and resumed her tasks like nothing happened. His eyes met Celine's from across the cabin, and in that moment he understood the line he was standing on, between complicity and conscience. Celine, meanwhile, remained in her seat, silent, but fully aware. Her screen showed no document now. When he stepped into row 2, all eyes followed him like school children sensing discipline. Celine didn't move. She looked up slowly, her posture unchanged, one arm resting on the armrest, the other cradling her closed tablet like a file of facts she had already memorized. Captain Simmons stopped at her row, one hand gripping the seat in front of hers, the other tightening around a copy of the altered manifest Clarissa had printed. He didn't greet her. He didn't introduce himself. His first words were low, clipped, and dangerous. "I don't want to escalate this any further," he said, his tone firm and commanding. "But if you don't cooperate, I will have to inform ground security to meet us when we land. You can leave this seat now or later, when it's a reportable incident." For a moment, the air in the cabin froze. A gasp was audible 2 rows behind them. Clarissa, standing 3 steps away, folded her arms, visibly satisfied. Jonah stood near the galley, frozen. Celine's lips parted slightly, as if she were about to respond, but instead she tilted her head, studying the man's face. "Captain," she said, voice level as water under glass, "I suggest you choose your next words carefully. I am where I belong. I have done nothing wrong. What grounds do you have to make such a threat?" Ray held up the clipboard. "This manifest doesn't show your name. C2A is unassigned in the system, which raises concern. Concern I don't take lightly when we're 30,000 feet in the air?" Celine narrowed her eyes. "You're reading from a printout that doesn't match the data taken at boarding. I suggest you cross-check your digital records before attempting to forcibly remove a confirmed passenger." Her calmness was unnerving. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't beg. She confronted. Ray, however, wasn't backing down, not yet. "This isn't personal," he muttered. "It's procedure." "No," she replied, her voice hardening just enough. "It's profiling." He blinked. The word had landed, and it didn't leave room for ambiguity. Clarissa stepped in quickly, perhaps sensing Ray's hesitation, and took advantage of the tension. She moved to the overhead bin, opened it with a sharp motion, and yanked Celine's carry-on from its spot. The briefcase thudded against the floor beside Celine's seat with a loud, deliberate clack. "We're trying to keep this section clear for documented first-class guests," Clarissa said, a mock-polite tone barely hiding the venom beneath. "We can store this in the back for you, or you can take it with you when you move." She smiled tightly, then added under her breath, "We only hold belongings for passengers who actually belong here." Celine didn't touch the briefcase. She didn't flinch. Her eyes moved between the captain and Clarissa, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "You're making a mistake," she said, "and it's one you will not be able to take back once this plane lands." Ray shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to being challenged, certainly not by someone who matched his authority without raising her voice. Clarissa scoffed. "If you had nothing to hide, you wouldn't be making this so difficult." Celine looked at her for a long, cold moment. "The only thing I've hidden," she said, "is how much I've tolerated." Jonah stepped forward now, unable to stand silently any longer. "Captain," he said quietly, "I saw her boarding pass myself. It scanned correctly. I confirmed it. She was assigned to A." Clarissa turned on him instantly. "Jonah, this is not your place, actually," Celine interrupted. "I believe he just found his place, right on the side of truth." Ray stared at Jonah, then back at Clarissa. The whispering in the cabin had reached a low hum. Passengers were now openly watching. Jonah had stepped back toward the galley, visibly shaken but still standing taller than he had moments ago. The captain retreated with an unreadable look, perhaps questioning what he had just walked into. But Clarissa stayed close, orbiting Celine's seat like a shark that had tasted blood but hadn't yet decided whether to attack again. The rest of first class had become a quiet arena of passive spectators, pretending to read magazines and sip drinks while their eyes tracked every move near row 2. That was when a click sounded from behind. Soft, deliberate, unmistakable. A phone camera. Celine didn't turn around immediately, but her senses flared. The man seated diagonally across the aisle, gray suit, sunglasses still perched arrogantly on his head, held his phone at chest level, angled toward her, as if she were a curiosity, an exhibit. "I'm going to send this to Meridian Corporate," he announced loudly, holding up the phone as if displaying his badge of righteousness. "Let them see what kind of passengers are sneaking into premium class these days." His voice wasn't mocking. It was certain. He wasn't asking a question. He was passing a verdict. Clarissa, standing 2 feet away, didn't stop him. She chuckled faintly, didn't even look uncomfortable. Instead, she smoothed her uniform and gave the man a small nod of acknowledgement, a silent thank you. Celine finally turned her head, meeting the man's gaze. She said nothing. The weight of her silence, of her restraint, carried more power than any raised voice. But the blow had landed, not in the way they intended, but in the way all attacks on dignity aim, precise, silent, and meant to humiliate without getting their hands dirty. Moments later, a soft voice piped up from the seat beside her. A boy, maybe 9 or 10, wide-eyed and curious, leaned slightly toward his mother on the opposite side of their shared row and asked in an innocent whisper that wasn't quiet enough, "Mom, why is she sitting here? Is she lost?" Celine didn't react, but she heard every word. The mother, a sleek woman in pearl earrings and a beige pantsuit, glanced over Celine once, and then turned to her son. "Don't ask questions like that, darling," she said, though her tone wasn't scolding, it was performative. Then she stood up, adjusted her cardigan, and leaned across her son. "Switch with me," she said quietly, though not quietly enough. "I just prefer you not sit so close. It's not comfortable." The words echoed louder in the vacuum that followed, bouncing off crystal glasses and muted gasps. Celine remained motionless, blinking once. Her hands, folded over her lap, did not tighten. Her breath did not change. She merely tilted her head slightly toward the window and looked outside, as if watching the clouds from ground level. Clarissa saw the exchange and didn't miss a beat. She offered the woman a fresh towel and smiled like she'd just helped her escape a dangerous inconvenience. "If there's anything else I can do to make your seat more comfortable, let me know," Clarissa said warmly. The woman smiled back, clearly grateful. Meanwhile, Celine sat like stone, invisible but all too visible, framed now as a disruption to privilege instead of a participant in it. Across the aisle, Jonah watched the entire scene unfold. His hands clenched, but he didn't speak. Clarissa had withdrawn to the galley, confident that she had successfully cornered Celine into quiet humiliation. The mother and child beside Celine now kept their bodies angled subtly away, their avoidance as deliberate as the insults that had come before. But Celine didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink when the soft chime of the entertainment system echoed through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice droned from the speakers, "we will begin our descent shortly. Please enjoy this brief message from one of our newest strategic partners." Clarissa, sipping tea behind the curtain, barely registered the announcement. She had heard dozens like it, usually meaningless PR fluff meant to distract passengers from turbulence. But this one was different. The screens embedded into each seat lit up with a golden animation of clouds parting to reveal the bold white and navy logo. Meridian Airlines x Von Dynamics. The partnership tag line shimmered underneath. $1.2 million tech and luxury travel alliance. Then the music began, smooth, modern, underscored with a rising orchestral crescendo. And the visuals cut to a boardroom scene. A man in a sharp navy suit stepped into frame. Edward Lanton, CEO of Meridian Airlines. He smiled at the camera, standing beside a tall black woman in a navy gray suit, elegant and commanding. "We are proud to partner with Von Dynamics to bring the future of premium aviation to our most valued passengers," Edward said warmly. "And it's my honor to work directly with Celine Vaughn, visionary leader and chairwoman of Von Dynamics, who's helping reshape how we connect innovation, experience, and excellence." Clarissa's teacup froze halfway to her lips. The shot cut to Celine seated at a conference table, speaking confidently into the camera. Her voice, rich and resonant, echoed from every screen in first class. "At Von Dynamics, we believe luxury is more than comfort. It's how people are seen, heard, and respected at every altitude." Her face filled the screen in crisp HD, composed, radiant, powerful. Clarissa's fingers slackened. The cup clinked softly against the galley counter. Passengers across the cabin turned in near-perfect synchronicity, their eyes landing on Celine in Seat 2A. She didn't turn toward them. She didn't have to. The silence spoke louder than any confrontation could. In row 3, the man who had snapped her photo swallowed visibly and lowered his phone, color draining from his cheeks. The woman with the child slowly turned back, her hand drifting from her son's shoulder, unsure whether to apologize or simply disappear. Celine's name was now etched across every screen. The camera returned to the two CEOs standing beside a scaled-down aircraft model embossed with both company logos. "This partnership represents a leap forward," Edward continued, "and MS. Vaughn's leadership ensures that everyone, regardless of background, has a place in the sky." Clarissa stepped slowly out of the galley, her face pale, her composure fractured. She stared at Celine like she was seeing her for the first time, and realizing she had made a catastrophic miscalculation. "No," Clarissa whispered, barely audible. "No, that's not. It can't be her." But it was. Jonah stood near the bulkhead, frozen, lips parted, his eyes flicking between the screen and Celine. A dozen heads turned. Some passengers squirmed in their seats, others looked away entirely, suddenly embarrassed by their own silence. Celine finally looked up, not at Clarissa, not at anyone in particular. She simply sat straighter, her posture radiating quiet dominance. The man who had smugly recorded Celine earlier now stared forward rigidly, gripping his seat's armrests as if trying to disappear. The mother and child beside Celine had both turned away, and the boy, perhaps sensing the tension more than understanding it, remained unusually quiet. Jonah stood silently by the galley, posture stiff with conflicted guilt and reluctant awe. Clarissa was nowhere to be seen. After the ad finished, she had retreated behind the curtain like a magician botching her trick. Celine sat still in 2A, her expression unreadable, the quiet curve of her mouth neither smiling nor condemning. The plane slowed, taxied toward the gate, and the voice of Captain Simmons crackled through the intercom. But this time, his tone lacked its earlier authority. It was mechanical, almost humbled. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles International. Please remain seated until we reach the gate and the seatbelt sign is turned off." No one moved. No one dared to. As the aircraft came to a stop at the jet bridge and the seatbelt sign chimed off, a ripple of motion spread through the cabin, shoulders stiffening, eyes lowering, awkward fumbles for carry-ons. Passengers pretending to check their phones to avoid acknowledging the woman in C2A. But before anyone could rise fully, the front door of the plane opened from the outside, and a man in a tailored gray suit with a Meridian Airlines pin stepped onto the aircraft, flanked by 2 assistants and a gate agent. The air pressure shifted instantly. This wasn't protocol. This was a presence. The man moved down the aisle with deliberate purpose, stopping only when he reached Celine. He didn't speak at first. He offered a deep, respectful bow of his head, a rare gesture from any executive, let alone one in front of an entire first-class cabin. "Ms. Vaughn," he said clearly, his voice carrying through the stunned silence. "On behalf of Meridian Airlines and its global board, please accept our sincerest apologies. We are aware of what occurred on this flight, and I assure you, corrective action is already underway." The surrounding passengers watched in stunned silence. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others now looked at Celine as if trying to reassemble who she really was in their minds. The executive continued, "We have arranged private transportation for your departure, as well as full priority handling of your luggage and security detail. A personal letter from our CEO is en route, but more importantly, I'm here to say this in front of everyone who saw what was done to you. You deserved better." His eyes flicked briefly toward the galley. Clarissa, pale and visibly trembling, had just emerged with a clipboard in hand, her voice faint as she stammered. "Sir, I didn't know. You knew enough to treat her like she didn't matter," he replied without turning fully toward her. "That's all it takes." Clarissa's face went slack. Her words collapsed in her throat. He returned his attention to Celine, who finally rose to her feet. Not fast, not triumphant, just steady, dignified. She accepted his gesture with a nod and turned to retrieve her briefcase. As she did, the woman in the row across finally found her voice. "Ms. Vaughn." "No need," Celine said quietly, not unkind, but final. She walked down the aisle, each step echoing like a verdict. The moment she disappeared past the curtain and exited the plane, the cabin erupted, not with words, but with the glowing lights of 100 phones unlocking. Someone had recorded the exchange. Then, another. A video snippet from earlier in the flight had already hit social media. Clarissa refusing Celine water, her hand tossing the cheap headphones onto the seat tray, the moment the coffee spilled across the leather briefcase. Within minutes of touchdown, the footage had already begun its digital ascent. On TikTok, on Twitter, on Instagram. Hashtags exploded across the screen. Hashtag Vaughn deserves first. Hashtag Meridian shame. Hashtag Celine Vaughn. The story was viral before Celine even reached the terminal. Clarissa's name trended within an hour, alongside the airline's official account, which released a carefully worded statement by noon. But it wasn't fast enough to stop the storm. Celine's face, once ignored, now filled every major feed in America, flawless, calm, undeniable. The moment Celine's heels touched the polished floor of LAX private terminal, the story was no longer just hers. It belonged to the world. News outlets picked it up within the hour. starting as a trending topic and evolving into a full-scale headline tsunami. Local affiliates ran the story under cautious titles like "Passenger Mistreatment Sparks Outrage," but national publications went for the jugular. Airline loses $1.2 million deal after racially charged incident, read the headline on the front page of the Wall Street Chronicle. When bias flies first class, corporate partnership canceled over in-flight discrimination, screamed Global Aviation Review. Cable news anchors debated the viral footage in primetime segments, breaking down every gesture, every word, every pause in Clarissa's expression. Clips of Celine's composed silence were looped against backdrops of outrage graphics. By the next morning, a leaked internal memo from Meridian Airlines confirmed the unthinkable. Von Dynamics had officially withdrawn from their freshly signed partnership, citing ethical misalignment and violation of core values. That withdrawal wasn't just symbolic. It cost the airline over $1 million in contracts, plus the projected revenue losses from reputation damage. Stocks wobbled. Shareholders panicked. The PR department scrambled to contain the fallout, releasing a flurry of apologies that failed to land. Because at this point, the internet didn't want statements. It wanted consequences. Meanwhile, Clarissa sat alone in a windowless HR review room inside the airline's corporate headquarters. Her once pristine uniform jacket hung limply on the chair behind her. Her hands, no longer poised and confident, now fidgeted nervously in her lap. She had been suspended without pay pending an internal investigation, one launched not only by Meridian Airlines, but also by the Federal Aviation Equity Oversight Board, a regulatory body formed after several high-profile discrimination cases in the past year. The new air industry legislation, passed only 6 months ago, classified repeated or willful discriminatory behavior in flight as a civil rights violation under national law. Clarissa's actions, broadcast globally, were now under legal scrutiny. Not just a PR nightmare, but a policy breach with teeth. A formal complaint had already been filed by Jonah, who had submitted a detailed account of what he had witnessed, including Clarissa's manipulation of the manifest, her orders to omit premium service items, and the hostile intent behind every decision. His testimony, paired with multiple video clips from other passengers, left little room for ambiguity. Across the country, travel advocacy groups seized the moment. Hashtags turned into action as passengers shared their own stories of silent bias, of being asked to show ID twice, of being randomly reseated, of being spoken to with different tones depending on the color of their skin. The moment had become a movement. Within 72 hours, Clarissa's name was known across all major media platforms. Her face had become the symbol of something far bigger than herself. Commentators debated whether she should be fired, prosecuted, or simply shamed into apology. But behind the noise, in a quiet office on the 10th floor of the airline's headquarters, the board was holding an emergency meeting. Shareholders were furious. One spoke bluntly. This one flight didn't just cost us a deal. It exposed the rot in our culture. How many other Clarissas do we have on payroll? The CEO, Edward Lanton, sat grim-faced as a vote was passed to initiate a full internal audit of training practices, employee conduct history, and diversity standards. A separate resolution was filed to amend company policy, mandating real-time oversight during all premium-level incidents and implementing AI-backed passenger treatment monitoring. But none of that came fast enough to stop the reputational hemorrhaging. By week's end, Meridian Airlines lost 3 other mid-tier business partnerships and saw a 17% dip in first-class bookings. The company bled credibility, and it all traced back to one decision made by one flight attendant who believed she could decide who belonged in a seat that wasn't hers to judge. Clarissa, now stripped of her badge and facing formal inquiry, sat in the HR office staring at a blank wall. A soft knock at the door preceded the entry of an ethics officer and a legal advisor. They didn't offer pleasantries. They laid a document in front of her, labeled Preliminary Violation Report Racial Discrimination Internal. Her throat tightened. She glanced at the form, then at them. "I didn't mean," she started. But they didn't want excuses. The world had already heard enough. Clarissa sat alone in the waiting area outside the ethics tribunal conference room, clutching a single folded page between her trembling fingers. For 3 weeks, her world had unraveled in real time, job lost, reputation destroyed, and her face posted across articles and comment sections with headlines like "The Cost of Bias at 35,000 feet." Her inbox had filled with hate and shame, her voicemail with former colleagues awkwardly distancing themselves. No one defended her. No one reached out. And for the first time in her life, Clarissa had nothing left to fall back on except her choices and the consequences they had summoned. The door opened, and a staff member gestured for her to enter. Inside, the tribunal room was quiet but formal. A panel of 3 industry officials and 1 legal observer sat at the far end. Across from them, unexpectedly, sat Celine Vaughn, not flanked by lawyers, not behind screen, just there, poised, present, and perfectly still. Clarissa approached slowly, every step weighed down with the gravity of everything she had done. She did not speak until instructed. Then, when asked if she had any statement to submit, she stood and unfolded the page in her hands. Her voice trembled slightly as she read. "I wrote this myself," she said, "not to lessen the damage I've caused, but to acknowledge it." She took a breath. To MS. Vaughn, "I am deeply sorry for how I treated you. I saw you and decided, without proof or reason, that you did not belong. I made assumptions, used power I didn't earn, and failed every standard I was sworn to uphold. I let pride and prejudice speak louder than facts. I judged you without knowing you. And you, by doing nothing except remain calm, forced me to look at myself. Not just the person I was in that moment, but the person I had become after years of unchecked bias disguised as professionalism. You made me see my reflection, and I hated it, but I needed to." She paused. Her hands shook, but she continued. "I can't undo the past, but I want to be part of changing the future. That starts here, with the truth. You deserve better. Not because you're powerful, but because you're human." When she finished, she folded the paper again and looked directly at Celine, eyes full of genuine remorse. Celine didn't speak right away. She hadn't spoken at all since entering the room. But now she stood. Her presence was exactly as it had been on the plane, measured, dignified, clear. "MS. Dent," she said softly, "what you did was wrong. It was cruel, calculated, and it spoke volumes about a problem bigger than either of us. But I've come to believe something important. Punishment changes behavior, but responsibility changes people." The room fell still. "I didn't come here for vengeance. I came here to see if you could face what you did without excuses. And you did. So now it's my turn." She pulled a printed statement from her folder and addressed the panel. "Effective today, I am choosing not to pursue further legal action. Instead, I'm launching a program in partnership with Meridian Airlines and the FAA, a training initiative focused on equity, awareness, and real accountability. I would like MS. Dent to be the first participant, if she's willing." The panel murmured among themselves, surprised. Clarissa's breath caught. "Why?" she whispered, almost involuntarily. Celine looked at her, not with softness, but with clarity. "Because forgiveness," she said, "isn't weakness. It's power reclaimed." Outside the room, news of the closed-door meeting spread fast. Celine's statement was published within the hour, shared across digital platforms alongside a quote that quickly became viral. "I didn't forgive her because she deserved it. I forgave her because I refused to carry what she gave me." Days later, Clarissa was spotted attending the first session of the Skyline Justice Initiative, a new industry program designed to root out implicit bias from within flight crew training. She didn't speak to the press. She didn't post on social media. But she showed up. Every week. She listened. She volunteered. She stopped explaining herself and started learning. And slowly, the noise died down. The shame began to transform into something quieter. Celine, for her part, went back to her work, never missing a step, never taking a victory lap. She had said what she needed to say, done what she needed to do. And in doing so, she left behind not just a legacy of power, but one of principle. What happened on that flight became more than a story of injustice. It became a blueprint for how to answer cruelty without becoming cruel, how to assert dignity without demanding destruction, and how to lead not by domination, but by example. The end. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful narratives just like it. What part of Celine's journey hit you the hardest? Did Clarissa deserve forgiveness, or should the consequences have been harsher? And tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one.